So I would like to recall some theorems and conjectures from last time. So we will not speak of the conjecture of Manin this time, but the conjecture of Flemmer, Schinzel-Zassenhaus, and some theorems which were established around that. And the talk of today is to show basically how the dynamical zeta function of the beta shift, so I will define what it is, can be used to attack these conjectures. So I would like to, so these conjectures are concerned with the minoration of the Mahler measure, and in higher dimension, minoration of the height. So I recall what is the Mahler measure of a polynomial like that with, well, in the context of the conjecture of Flemmer, that's with integer coefficients, but it is defined with complex coefficients in the general case. So for a polynomial, you take the absolute value of the dominant coefficient and the product of all the moduli of the roots, which are outside the closed unit disk. And we have seen I don't know the origin of that. We have seen last time the theorem of Chris-Smith, which says, so I will write the inequality there, that if you take an integer polynomial which has not a constant term and assume non-reciprocal, then this very important theorem tells you that the Mahler measure of f is greater than the smallest Piso number, which is 1, 32, 47, and so on, and by the theorem of Siegel, which is the dominant root of x3 minus x minus 1. So this, the attack of the conjecture of Flemmer for the minoration, when we want to go very close to 1, okay, is interesting only when the minimal polynomials of algebraic numbers are reciprocal, okay. And I recall the theorem of Dobrowolski I have indicated last time. It's a minoration of the Mahler measure for alpha, an algebraic number which is reciprocal. That's 1 plus almost 1 for the constant, log d divided by log d. So d is the degree of alpha. And it's, if you write 1 minus epsilon, it's not effective. And the conjecture of Schinzel-Zassenhaus, I am embarrassed with this line. It's concerned with the house of alpha, the maximal modulus of the conjugates of alpha, so greater than 1 plus universal constant divided by the degree. Yeah. So. So two theorems, one conjecture, and the conjecture of Flemmer. It's a problem. Actually, it was stated as a problem because he was looking for very large prime numbers in his paper, exhaustively. From constructions are made using polynomials of very small Mahler measure. Okay. So the conjecture of Flemmer says that there is a universal constant C greater than 0, then the Mahler measure is at least 1 plus C of alpha. So it's addressed to, by the term of Chris-Smith, to any reciprocal algebraic number alpha, which is not a root of unity. So this is the conjecture of Flemmer. So I would like to give examples of algebraic integers which have a very small Mahler measure. And I would like to switch actually to list you can find on the internet of the smallest Mahler measure, like that. So you have the degree, that's real algebraic integers. You have the degree, 8, 10, 12, 14, and so on. And with the number of Flemmer here, 1.1762, and so on, which is given by the half, because the reciprocal polynomial is reciprocal. The half coefficient vector, like that. And among them, you have Salem numbers. And the list is complete up till degree 44. So it was obtained by several people, actually. In France, Georges Rhin, in Metz, and his collaborators, Chris Smith, Mossinghoff, and people in Canada, Lisonek, and so on. So we have now an idea of the small Mahler measures, and you see that there is absolutely no value below this value obtained by the very famous polynomial of Flemmer, which is x10 plus x9 plus x8 minus x6 minus x5 minus x4, so plus x2 plus x plus 1. So that's a Limmer polynomial, and the dominant, the Mahler measure of is written here, so that degree 10. Okay. So this requires, for instance, for Salem numbers, for which all the roots are on the unit circle except one. All the conjugates like that are by complex conjugated pairs. Okay, so the Mahler measure, if beta is a Salem number, we have the Mahler measure of beta is beta itself by definition. And in this list, you have the list of small Mahler measures for Salem numbers in particular. So the list is fairly long, so now there is a list up till degree 200 and more. You can go further, but there are some holes in the list after. And exactly, yes, exactly. Well, there was during the 19th century this whole conjecture saying that any cyclotomic polynomial has coefficient 0, plus 1, or minus 1. So I think that at the time of Flemmer, they were playing with polynomials with coefficient 0, plus 1, minus 1 only. And that's the conjecture of Flemmer is a departure from cyclotomic polynomials. So it's natural at that time to play with such polynomials. But the conjecture of the 19th century is totally wrong, because Suzuki has shown that if you take any integer, you always find a cyclotomic polynomial for which a coefficient is equal to this integer. We cover all the integers. So there is a paper by Peter Mori more recently about the distribution of values of coefficients of cyclotomic polynomials. And the departure of that is all the problem of Flemmer. So I would like to continue now. So that's just examples. So now how to play with the dynamics of algebraic integers to attack actually the problem of the minoration of the height. So it's a bit hidden. So I would like to introduce the dynamics in the sense of Rényi-Parry and arithmetical dynamical systems attached to real numbers and families of them and vary them in some sense. So it's so the problem of the minoration in the context of Flemmer is addressed to alpha, so reciprocal algebraic integers, and for which the Mahler measure of alpha is close to 1. So what does it mean? We know that the Mahler measure of alpha is the Mahler measure of alpha minus 1, So what does it mean for the distribution, the geometry of the roots? You have the unit circle like that. So 0, 1, and you have a certain number of conjugates, probably alpha is here. You have a certain number of conjugates on the unit circle and very close to the unit circle, inside, outside, and so on, distributed regularly about the unit circle and distributed by pairs of complex conjugates, like that. Okay? So the idea is use the dynamics in the sense of Reni-Parry, so I will introduce that, of the house of alpha. Well, generically, canonically, it's called beta. So beta is a real number greater than 1, like that. And we introduce a very simple, apparently very simple, but very rich system, which is a dynamical system. So the compact space is 0, 1, like that. And 2x, you associate the fractional part of beta x, like that. So this is called the beta transformation. So beta real, a real number, any real number. And in this idea, in the attack of the conjecture of Flemmer, we will allow beta to tend to 1. Okay. So there are, to any dynamical system like that, there are analytic functions attached to them, a dynamical zeta function, transfer operators, Fredholm determinant, generalized Fredholm determinant, and so on. So the idea is to observe these functions, that's power series actually in some sense, varying when beta runs over that's interesting also for transcendental numbers, but that's interesting when alpha runs over reciprocal algebraic integers and to take the houses of such, like that. So in the first case, and it's actually sufficient to consider reciprocal algebraic integers which are real, beta which are real, and to observe, so when beta runs in this collection, to observe the analytic function associated to them. So there is a certain lacunarity of and lenticularity attached to that, and we gain like that a certain structure theorems on the polynomials of very small Malher measures. I will show that, but we do not control all the roots. So that's the singularities of the dynamical zeta functions which should play a role, an important role, in the minoration of the height. So I go back to the definition of Reni. So Alfred Reni was an Hungarian probabilist, and in 1957 he has published the novel theorem of, for representing real numbers using an increasing function, positive function f, and that's called f expansions, like that. So you have digits, epsilon 0, epsilon 1, and so on, and the iterates of f in this sense. So when you take, for instance, this function which is x divided by beta, so beta is greater than 1, we are in this context. When x is between 0 and beta and f of x is 1 when x is greater than beta, the f expansion of f takes this form. So you recognize something which is extremely usual, which is the dynamical system of numeration, which is an international convention, which is a base 10, when beta equals 10, okay? And that's an extension of our numeration system. So in computer science, we use base 2. Base 10 is usual. So in the Maya numeration system, which was deciphered fairly recently, the base 20, and in base 60 in Mesopotamia, Assyria, and so on. And so that's a mathematical possibility to have a coding of real number in base beta like that. So what is interesting in this story is under certain conditions, it's possible to have a faithful representation of any x. So I will go back to the analytic functions associated to the dynamical systems after. And for instance, So there are conditions which ensure the faithfulness. So if we take this, we denote epsilon I like that. So 2x is associated a certain sequence, like 1 is associated in base 10. You can write that like that, or you can write that 1.0000 and so on. That's numeration systems. That's exactly the same, mathematically, that's exactly the same system. But when you pay in euros, you don't pay with that, so we forget about that. There is actually the conditions of Paris, generalized, we forget about the dedoubling, and we use, like that, the uniqueness of the correspondence. So in base beta, when beta is transcendental or algebraic, it's possible also. So I will, voila. So after the introduction of this general numeration systems, William Parry in one of the papers of William Parry, of the first papers, one in 1960, Parry has reconsidered the ergodic properties of this system and the complete set of admissible sequences for any real number. So it defines a certain language in base beta, so all the possibilities of sequences like that, which are associated to the real number, and this real number, when we develop it according to the beta transformation, gives you again back this sequence. So a representation is base beta. What it is, it's of x. So it's a real number or beta representation or a beta real representation. If beta is integer, it's an infinite world belonging to a certain alphabet. So in the alphabet, when you are in base 10, that's just 0, 1, 9. We stop at 9. Okay. So in the case of the base beta, we stop at integer part of beta, or upper integer part of beta in general. And when in the problem of Lemmer, the alphabet becomes universal in the sense that the alphabet is only 0, 1. Will be exactly 0, 1. So it's an infinite world xi of alphabet a beta, such that x is represented like that. The main difference with the case where beta is an integer is that x may have several representations, as I said, and a particular beta representation called the beta expansion or the greedy expansion is denoted by d beta of x and can be computed using the greedy algorithm or the beta transformation here. So like that. So we take the iterates and we have all the digits computing actually the integer part of beta and the I-1 iterates of beta at x. So we can write like this, the beta expansion instead of that. And we know the digits, so it can be computed. Several thousands can be computed, but after it's on machine, it's extremely tricky. And so now when we go to the analytics of that, so first, the theorem of Renyi says that if you have an integrable function g, we have a limit like that, where the limit does not depend upon x. So that's on the orbit of x, okay, for almost x. And there exists a measure which is equivalent to the Lebesgue measure, which is invariant with respect to the beta transformation, such that so the measure of E for any measurable set E in the interval 0, 1, given like that by the integral of h, where h is a certain measurable function satisfying that. Okay, so there exists a measure equivalent to the Lebesgue measure. Okay, so it satisfies that, and for which we have this. So there is a certain regularity and absolute continuity with respect to the Lebesgue measure of the density function. The theorem of Paris increases that. So the density function of an invariant measure is equal to the pure jump function. So he calculated that. So that what appears here is that the iterates of one which control actually the jumps. So h beta x, when you sum up on all the x less than the nth iterate of 1 over beta n. So that's the density function, and it's a step function if and only if the beta expansion of beta is ultimately periodic. So the dynamical system 0, 1, T beta, and with this invariant measure, it calls the Rényi-Paris numeration system in base beta. And we will allow beta to tend to 1. And there is a dynamical system associated to that. And with ergodic theory, we can simplify a lot the form of the dynamical system, of the dynamical zeta function. Okay. We are in spaces of shift. So when that's a greedy algorithm, we play with the powers of beta in this context. So I will continue to describe the dynamical system, and I will arrive to the properties of some power series, which will be useful to understand how we can minorate the Malin measure at the end. So we need that. So the set of sequences, admissible sequences. So the complete set first of the infinite product of the defining alphabet in base beta is endowed with the lexicographical order and the product topology. So it's a compact. The one-sided shift, when you shift all the sequence to the left, here, for instance, and so on. So it gives another real number and leaves invariant a certain subset of the beta expansion of real numbers. And the closure in this compact set, which is a beta to the n, is called the beta shift and is denoted as beta. And we have a commutative diagram. The beta shift is a subshift of the complete compact set, well, for which we have so the Rényi beta expansion composed with beta transformation, that's the shift and the Rényi beta expansion. So it holds on the interval. So in other terms, there is it's such that there is a one-to-one correspondence like that. So it's very useful. So we can describe any real number like that by sequences. So the inequalities, so beta will tend to 1. So we need to have an order which is so it's decreasing to 1 regularly. The correspondence here is totally different in a number theory. It will be a lexicographical ordering on the digits, and we will see of what is coming. So this one-to-one correspondence between the totality ordered interval 0,1 and the totality lexicographical ordered beta shift is absolutely essential for controlling what will happen. So Paris has shown that only one sequence of digits entirely controls the beta shift and that the ordering is preserved when dealing with the greedy algorithm expansions. So in this story, we don't need to have the analytic functions which will be totally controlled, and the language in base beta and the complete beta shift will be controlled by the orbit of 1 in this story. And all the analytic functions will be not attached to the complete interval, but only the element 1. That's the stuff. We have, it simplifies a lot. So the usual inequality which is a usual ordering, is transformed into the lexicographical ordering, as I said. And the greatest element of S beta, so it comes from the Rényi beta expansion of 1, is this sequence, and corresponds exactly to that. It's an infinite sequence, with the digits explicitly computed. So we have, actually, when beta is an algebraic integer, so we have polynomials of this type appearing in the orbit, like that. So we are in number fields, and the digits ti belong all to the alphabet. So that they are bounded, they belong to a finite set, actually. It comes from the greedy algorithm. So what controls now the complete language and the uniqueness? So we have, in base 10, we remove this representation of 1. So in base beta, that's the equivalent is that, is a bit more general. So we construct from the orbit of 1 a certain sequence, C1, C2, and so on. So which is purely periodic. That's the second line if the Rényi beta expansion of unity is finite, and if not, is infinite, that's the same. And from this, okay, and the equivalent of to remove 0.99999 is now this infinite set of lexicographical inequalities, which constitute the so-called conditions of Paris. That's due to William Parry. So a sequence of elements in the alphabet, finite or not, is admissible if and only if all the shifts to the left. So it's a sequence. All the shifts to the left of this sequence are lexicographically smaller than the one which is constructed from the orbit of 1. So the orbit of 1 controls everything. So any admissible representation corresponds to a real number, and conversely, the greedy beta expansion of x is exactly this one. If you take a sequence of integers in this alphabet, and it verifies that, then necessarily it's a Rényi beta expansion of this real number. So it constitutes an infinite number of inequalities, and what is the meaning of that in number theory? So I will answer. So in number theory, inequalities are often associated to collections of hard spaces, so in geometry of numbers, and so there are many theorems and to infinity and so on. The conditions of Paris are of lexicographical nature and totally different nature, and actually they correspond, because there is an infinite number of inequalities, to gappiness, lacunarity, of the coefficient vector of the power series, which are Paris-upper functions, which are actually, if we use a theory of Fredholm, that generalize Fredholm determinant, that power series of the transfer operators of the beta transformations. So this is so to inequalities, when we attack the problem of Flemmer using beta 1, beta 2 smaller, and converging, for instance, through 1. For the Paris-upper function, I will define that the inverses of the dynamical systems, the lacunarity change because of the conditions of Paris. That's totally unusual. Huh? Okay, so I will specify that. So in the correspondence 0, 1 to the beta shift, so the element x equal 1 admits the equivalent of 1 is the Rényi Paris beta expansion of 1 as counterpart. So the uniqueness of the beta expansion and its self-admissibility properties characterize the base of transformation beta as follows. There is a unique basis, so it's a proposition like that. So if you take a sequence like that of non-negative integers with A1 greater than 1 an less than 0, A0. So the unique solution of this beta of this equation is such that d beta of 1 is exactly equal to this one if and only if all the conditions, the Schiff conditions, lexicographically are satisfied like that. First. So now in the problem of Flemmer, beta is between 1 and 2. It's a real number, a priori. It's, of course, a reciprocal algebraic integer. So if beta is a simple Paris number, so the Rényi beta expansion of unity is finite, then there exists n, depending of beta, such that, that's the definition, Tn. Oh, okay. Okay, so that's the definition of a simple Paris number. So that's a finite. There is a Tn non-zero and all 0, 0, the digit 0. Paris proves that the set of simple Paris numbers is dense in the half line. 1 plus infinity. So we have the dynamics says that we have a full collection of dense collection of a priori real numbers, Paris numbers. We don't know what it is exactly. And if beta is a Paris number which is not simple, that is to say the sequence is eventually periodic and not finite. So we can write that like that, and so there is a pre-period and a period. So that's called Paris numbers. Paris numbers, that the dynamics is, people in computer science say that the beta shift is Sophic or finite tap. So there are two types, but there are infinitely many other possibilities of aperiodic sequences, eventually having arithmetic projection in there. Okay. If beta is between 1 and 2 and is an algebraic number which is not a Paris number, the sequences of gaps of zeros in the remain asymptotically moderate and controlled by the Mahler measure of beta in the following sense. So I obtained this theorem some years ago. It's in the Annales du Fourier. So there is a control of, there is a certain gappiness. So there are gaps which are controlled between the sequence Mn and Sn of indices of the digits of the Rényi beta expansion of unity. There are gaps and extremities which are non-zero, and the lim sup of that's called the Ostrovsky quotient in the sequence are less than the log of the Mahler measure of beta divided by the log of beta. So if you know ergodic theory, that's two different entropies. So this is the entropy of the beta shift, and this is an entropy of another dynamical system involved. There are two dynamical systems involved. One is hidden, the other one not. So Boris Adamczewski and Jan Bujold have complemented that another view to reobtain my theorem using Schmidt's subspace theorem. So for Salem numbers, for instance, we don't know whether there are Salem numbers arbitrarily close to 1, because the conjecture of Flemmer says that there is a Salem number strictly greater than 1 normally, but we don't know whether it is a number of Flemmer or not. And the upper bound for the lacunarity is 1, so in there. So we have not a lot of choice. If there is a lacunarity, is reasonable. And for any reciprocal algebraic integer in the problem of Flemmer, the lacunarity of this sequence formed by the digits of the Rényi beta expansion of 1 are always satisfying that. So it's moderate lacunarity all the time. Never Hadamard gaps. So now varying the base of enumeration gives a key to attack the conjecture of Flemmer. So as I said, the common alphabet is 0, 1. The alphabet of the beta shift is 0, 1, upper integer part of beta minus 1. So beta equal 10, that's 9, okay? So beta equal 2, well, we have only, okay? Beta equal 2, and beta between 2 and 1, that's a universal alphabet appears. So it's enjoyable. So now, as I said, what happens we go to the study of the lacunarity and its consequences. So if we have two real algebraic integers, so this inequality can be read on the digits of the representation of 1. That's a proposition of Paris, which seems very natural, but which is very deep, actually, and extremely useful. So it transposes this inequality to a lexicographical inequality. So now, so now we have a sequence of digits, which is 1 0 and n minus 1 times 1. And if you check all the shifts to the left, you can check that it is very easily, it's written there, it is self-admissible. So, like that. And by the first proposition, it defines a unique beta. So we will define, so the unique beta is positive. We will call this one theta, the inverse of theta indexed by n plus 1. From the second proposition, we deduce that the sequence is decreasing and tends to 1 when n tends to infinity. So we have a sequence like that. So we are starting, but very simple triplet, like that. And it corresponds, when n tends to infinity, to a sequence of real numbers tending to 1. So this sequence is absolutely fundamental and will help to understand the analytics of all the reciprocal algebraic numbers which are in between them. We will study them independently from trinomials and all the reciprocal algebraic integers in between. So the real number theta 2 minus 1 is the unique, the golden mean. Okay, it's the dominant root of x squared minus x minus 1. It's a Piso number, and the value is 1.618. So we are playing now when n is greater than 3 with real algebraic integers in the interval 1 to square root of 5. Okay. And it's there is a graduation by these ones, like that. So that's so that this one is theta 2 minus 1. This one is theta 3 minus 1, theta 4, and so on. So we recover with theta 3 minus 1 the polynomial x3 minus x minus 1. Here that's x squared minus x minus 1. Theta 4, theta 5. That's okay. Theta. No, okay, sorry. This one corresponds to the smallest Piso number. So this is a fundamental sequence, and the index is not that's very important to observe, is not the degree of beta, it's not the degree of the algebraic integer we obtain here, but the number of zeros is controlled by the lacunarity, a minima. So we can write that like that now. We have intervals which are under control by a certain integer, which is correspond to the lacunarity and the possible lacunarities of the Rényi beta expansion of unity. Okay. Like that, starting at the golden mean and then, okay. And when n tends to infinity, we have reciprocal algebraic integers very close to 1. So we have a control of the convergence towards 1. And now the following theorem shows that the gappiness also admits some uniform lower bound for all gaps of zeros. So the conjunction of minimality on the length of the gaps of zeros is only a function of the interval there, that is of the index n, to which beta belongs. So the theorem says that. So a real number, that's also true for transcendental numbers, so belongs to this interval if and only if the Rényi beta expansion of unity is of this form. So we have n here, a number of zeros which is n minus 1, and then we have these conditions, that is to say the number of zeros here is greater a minima by n minus 1 for all k. Here, here, here. And we know by the theorem, the previous theorem, that it's impossible to have Hadamard gaps. So it's impossible to have an asymptotics of the lacunarity, which is greater than the logarithm of the Mahler measure divided by the log of beta. It's controlled by the two entropies of two dynamical systems. I will not come back to that, but it's like that. So that's the self-admissibility conditions of Paris. So there is a proof, but you will check that. I will continue. We'll check that on the site. So now we build analytic functions associated to this lacunarity, and we would like to grasp some information from that on the conjugates, the Galois conjugates of any beta in these intervals whose extremities are two successive numbers like that. That's Perron number actually. So beta is a real non-integer number, beta, and T1, T2, T3, it's Rényi beta expansion of unity. And we form a power series with only -1 plus the sum for I greater than 1, Ti, Zi. So the vector coefficient is -1, and the sequence of digits of the Rényi beta expansion of unity. That's called the Paris-Yappa function at beta because it's formed, it's very close to the conditions of Paris, defining the complete language in base beta. And the TIs in this alphabet. So we say that's a Paris number if d beta is finite or ultimately periodic. So if it is finite, the Paris-Yappa function is a polynomial. If it is eventually periodic, it's a rational function. And it is simple if it is finite. So I will come back. Okay. So what is a Paris number exactly? The very nature of this function. It's a generalized. It's very simple to be defined like that, but actually there is a Fredholm theory behind, saying that's a generalized Fredholm theory. That is to say, the numeration systems in base beta are such that the Perron-Frobenius operators. So I will show the slide. It's a bit complicated. The Perron-Frobenius operators there are not compact, so it's impossible to use the Fredholm theory as such, but with transfer operators, we have access to the information, and the Paris-Yappa function can be defined as a generalized Fredholm determinant. So the generalized freedom determinant in the inverse of the dynamical zeta function, and the dynamical zeta function of the beta sheet of the dynamical zeta function of this system is the Barry Mazur. Martin Mazur, pardon. One. So we are interested in the function which is actually okay. So there is a sign because there is a -1. So this one is very often, so up to a multiplication by a cyclotomic polynomial to the Paris-Upper function at beta. So we have access to the vector coefficient, the lacunarity of this one, but actually the zeros are interesting to study as such, but there are poles of the distribution of poles of the zeta function. Okay, so that's the transfer operators machinery. Finally, going to the definition of the dynamical zeta function. So the dynamical zeta function, it's a way we take the exponential of the sum, so Zn divided by n, and we count actually the number of points which are left pointwise invariant by the nth iterate. Okay, it's counting orbits. So there is a theorem by Baladi and Keller saying that. So we take beta in the interval of interest for the conjecture of Flemmer there. So the Artin-Mazur zeta function is non-zero and meromorphic in the open unit disk, and its inverse is holomorphic in this domain. And if we suppose the modulus less than 1, then it is a pole of multiplicity k. If and only if, then -1 is an eigenvalue of the transfer operator of the same multiplicity. So there is a correspondence between the transfer operators of the eigenvalues of transfer operators and the poles with the multiplicity. In the case of the beta sheaf, the multiplicities are always 1. And we have access to a certain type of information about the poles there. Okay. So as I said, it's the Paris-Upper function here is by this very definition, and so it's a theorem from Takahashi that's ergoditions from 40 years ago, or something like that. Shanji Ito, who have shown the correspondence. And when beta is a simple Paris number, when the Rényi beta expansion of unity in base beta is finite, then there is a product of cyclotomic polynomials appearing there. Well, in general, it's not the case. It is holomorphic. It has a non-zero in certain closed disk of radius 1 over beta, except at 1 over beta, which is a simple zero. So we have access to that. And the form is that. So it corresponds, so the dynamical zeta function has a denominator which is 1 minus beta z times a power series which has coefficient in the real interval 0, 1, okay? And we are bound to understand the singularities of the zeta function, to understand the zeros of such power series. So that's So where AG in general. Huh? Okay. Like that. That's a decomposition which is like that, comes naturally. So it's general. It lies in this domain, in the complex plane. And what is this domain actually? It was studied by Solomiak. It's a fractal, which has a boundary which is partially smooth and partially fractal, and of deep interest to understand the geometry of the poles of the dynamical zeta function. So this zeta function has exceptionally, it's for this one, Euler product. And so when we are interested, when beta is a simple Paris number or a non-simple Paris number which is not simple, then we have access to so-called polynomials like that, which for which the zeros actually correspond to the zeros of the Paris-Upper function. So the Paris is called the Paris polynomial. So it's a polynomial which is in the ideal generated by the minimal polynomial of beta. Beta is assumed reciprocal, so well. Okay, so we have access to some polynomials by the dynamics. The problem is how to correlate these analytic functions to the minimal polynomial and to go back actually to functions which are defined on the set of conjugates, Galois conjugates of beta, in order to obtain a minorant of the Malin measure of beta. That's the idea. So that's different types of Paris functions. For instance, for some Piso numbers, I think that's yes, the cubic family of that's cubic Piso numbers. Yes, by Frédéric Bassineau. There are factorization of Paris-Upper functions which are polynomials actually like that, with a lot of cyclotomic polynomials time other polynomials in there. So the factorization is a very deep question because it's linked to the knowledge of the geometry of the poles in there, of course. So in this case, that's easy. In general, there are two cases for the dynamical zeta function. Either it can be a polynomial like that, or it can be a rational fraction, or much more difficult case, according to the dynamics of beta in the Rényi-Paris numeration system. So, yes, I am. So this slide is about actually the which algebraic number is a Paris number? What is the correspondence between the number theory and the dynamics? So a Piso number by the term of Klaus Schmidt and Bertrand Matisse is a Paris number. Piso number is a Paris number systematically. So the dynamic is fairly simple. So Piso numbers play a very important role in many questions in math. So a theorem of Boyd says that every Salem number of degree 4 is a Paris number. The number of Lemmer is a Paris number. And some Salem numbers are not Paris numbers. It's a recent theorem of Akiyama. Okay, so we have expressions, as I said, of the Paris-Upper function like that, allowing to study the zero explicitly from the digits and to understand the distribution of poles of the zeta function here, how they distribute there. Okay, so we know that the Malin measure is small of beta. So that's examples of Paris-Upper functions like that. So for instance, that's the dynamics of the number of Lemmer. So you take the dominant, the Salem number, which is the root here, the dominant root there, and you have the Paris-Upper function of the Salem number is this one. So you have between Z and Z12, you have 11, so 10 zeros. And between 31 and 12, you have a gap of length at least 10, and so on. 10, 10 minimal, 10, 10, 10, 10, and so on. There is this gappiness control at minima. It's pairs. It's a lacunary polynomial, actually. It's a lacunary power series. It's a lacunary polynomial, yes. No. It's a lacunary power series here, eventually periodic. So there is a theorem of Akiyama saying if you take that's the unique example which is known, saying that it's very difficult to characterize when beta as a dynamics which is simple or not, when the dynamical system is the dynamical zeta function is periodic or not. So it says that the dominant root gamma n of this trinomial is a pair number which is a Paris number if and only if n equal 2 or 3, and after it is not. Okay. So this means what? So there is a dichotomy. So for this object, there are two cases. Either it can be a polynomial, of course, but more general, a rational fraction, a rational function, or the second case, it's an analytic function which is defined on the unit, open unit disk with a natural boundary. Which is z equal 1. So the distribution of zeros is extremely important in both cases and extremely difficult to grasp in this context when we are very close to natural boundaries of the zeta function, and a bit easier in this case. But actually, poles of zeta functions were not studied in the literature for the beta shift, as we will see. And there are lenticular roots of lenticular zeros of this dynamical zeta function, which give a certain information towards the minorant of the Mallet-Measure of beta. So if you go back to the article by Lemmer in 1933, you find at the end of his paper a certain number of examples. That's Salem number with the minimal polynomials. And when you take the Rényi beta expansion of unity, so in base beta, so you take the dominant root of these polynomials, you obtain that. You have access to the distribution of digits. You have the minimal condition on the gaps appearing. So you know where these betas are according to the power, the number of zeros at the beginning, just after 1. So for instance, when you develop the Paris-Upper function starts like that. So there is always a monomial like that, plus another term, which can be considered as a perturbation. So the idea analytically to understand the zeros in general of Paris-Upper functions characterizing completely beta by the beta coefficients, we will take only further monomials and as a reference and treat that in perturbation to understand the distribution of poles. In the first case, that's fairly easier, but in the second case, it's very difficult, and we have access only to some poles which are off the unit circle here. So that's 12, so you have still this monomial there. So it corresponds to the one I have written at the beginning, so that's, and it corresponds to this polynomial, which is -1 plus z plus z12. So here that's n equal 12, and so on. Is it? Okay, so this dichotomy, the two cases, come the so-called Carlson-Polya dichotomy. Actually, it was also a theorem of Zegge, which says that if you would take a power series like that, Bn Zn, with Bn belonging to a finite set, then either you are in the first case or you are in the second case. Okay. It's extremely strong. And with dynamical, the Reni-Parry numeration systems, you all systematically obtain -1 plus the sum of Ti Zi, so such power series, with digits which are in a finite alphabet. So the Carlson-Polya theorem systematically works on these functions. And you know that these functions are generalized freedom determinants. You know by the ergoditions that they are linked to the dynamical zeta function. We have some properties of the dynamical zeta function, and now we have access to that. So what happens with the poles? What happens with the zero? And we know that in this power series, okay, so this one is -1 plus z plus zn plus z n1 plus z m2 plus and so on. With so we have taken n greater than 2. So we are in the root for beta between 1 and the golden mean. We know that M1, the conditions of Parry correspond to M1 minus n greater than n minus 1, M2 minus n1 greater than n minus 1, and so on. This is a lacunarity controlled a minima by a unique integer which is n. Okay, so n is here, and because of these conditions are satisfied, you know that there is a unique corresponding to this series. There is a unique beta. So this one corresponds to a unique beta greater than 1. So if we have this gappiness controlled a minima like that with these conditions, it may correspond to a transcendental number, an algebraic number. So the problem is we have analytic functions, we have the minimal polynomials, and we would like to understand, to go back to the Galois conjugates of beta and to control them. And because the Mahler measure, the Mahler measure of beta, so that's algebraic integer, so the dominant coefficient is 1, that's just the product of the beta I like that for beta I, the conjugates greater than 1, or less than 1, let's say. That's the same. Voilà. So, so we first, so next time I will go back to the study of the zeros of that, of such power series, and I will understand the distribution of zeros, where they are, so in the fractal of Solomiac, attached to beta, and then to try to understand the relationship between this analytic function coming from the dynamics to the minimal polynomial of beta. Okay, so once it will be done, we will decompose actually the minimal polynomial according to this power series. So that's a generalized Fredholm determinant attacking the minimal polynomial, which has a reputation to be irreducible. Okay, and this one comes from a totally another planet. So as I said, the detail in one slide, it's a generalized Fredholm determinant. So in this story, we have to understand that's a very simple writing of things which have a very deep sense. That's to write the minimal polynomial there, divided by f beta times f beta. So it's very simple to write that. But analytically, you have to be very, very, very careful. Because you can write that in the complex number, on the field of complex numbers, like this, when you not formally, but with a complex variable like that. So we will give a sense to that. But it's impossible to have a sense to the open unit disk, and we have to remove a certain neighborhood of the unit circle. So there is a certain open set, omega n. So I will show the definition of that. Omega n, so strictly less than the open unit disk, necessarily to avoid all the difficulties very close to the natural boundaries, on which this has a sense, it's holomorphic, so Z belonging to omega n. And the n which is here is the n which is there, and actually which controls the convergence of beta to 1. So beta, that's the two successive ones. So this one is extremely, this open set is very important. And what will appear, and I will do that explicitly, that there is a collection of poles of the zeta function which appear inside. And that's all. For the rest, it's impossible to say something. I will show an example how it works. And depending, so that's lenticular sets of poles which appear there and which actually control a minorant of this product. A part of this product will be totally out of reach. Another part will be under control by this lenticular. So I will show how it works on examples. And to correlate that to the fracturability of the minimal polynomial. So it's impossible to say more because we have no access to a method actually. That's a Riemann hypothesis. When you are very close to infinity here, that's very close to the natural boundary of the dynamical zeta function. It's impossible to have a description of the geometry of the poles. It's impossible. I don't know any method now. Okay, so I will stop here because after I will, next time I will first study the fractal of Solomiac. I will go deeper to the sets of zeros of the Paris-Yappa functions, and I will understand with you the correspondence, and I will show on some examples how it works. And we will go back to the Mahler measure, to a minor round of the Mahler measure. And the next step will be to use, actually, a description of the roots of a very important set of Paris-Upper functions, which is, so this is a family. They're just trinomials, actually, but from the dynamical viewpoint, that's a Paris-Upper function, and to understand the geometry of the root of that. So it will, by perturbation, will give access to the distribution of zeros, and in particular lenticular sets of poles of the zeta function when beta is very, very close to 1. So at the end, I will try to convince you that the dynamics of algebraic numbers like that give a very powerful analytic tools to understand functions like the Mahler measure, which are defined actually in a limit problem in number theory like the conjecture of Flemmer on a partial set of conjugates. That's okay. So I will stop here. Thank you very much.